Hi, everybody. I'm Keith Costigan. Welcome into the final panel discussion of the day. I'll be joined by a couple of esteemed people who will help me along the way. I'll introduce those in a couple of moments. But our topic is going to be MLS. We're over a quarter of a century now into the league. And we've seen over the last couple of years this, Eurocentric kind of view of the league with the names of the teams, how we do things. And we've also seen a little bit of a different take on how to run a league with GAM, TAM, all this different kinds of ways of paying your players and bringing them in. So we're going to discuss, is it time for MLS to just embrace the weird? I'm not quite sure why they picked me as the host of something that says weird. Maybe there's a little something in that as well. But delighted to bring in the people I'll be discussing with. First of all, Tom Bogert. You'll know him if you read anything on MLS. Breaks all the big stories. He's always got his finger on the pulse of the next big move in MLS. So, Tom, delighted to be joined by you, and also by Maggie and Ntim, who is the CEO of Trinity 3 Agency. She's worked for several big companies. And Maggie, you can give us a viewpoint from maybe the agency side of dealing with MLS versus dealing with other leagues, and also how the league continues to market itself and how it will continue to do that moving forward. So, I guess the first question, and I'll open up to both of you. When we're dealing with other American sports, it seems to be this is the only country for that sport. Whether it be basketball or NFL, it is the elite home for it. But soccer is different. It is a sport that's worldwide, and MLS is a league that's pretty new in its infancy. So you could say US was late to the party in that regard. What have you made of the growth of MLS, and where do we go next with MLS over the course of the coming years with what we've seen with the growth in the first 25 years?
I'll let Maggie go first.
Tom, I'll open that to you. Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna let Tom do it because he's like the goat of this. So.
Well, yeah. First of all, thanks for having me, Keith. Maggie, great to do this with you guys. I think the weird has been titled into the shirt choice. So Keith, you're off the hook for that joke. But yeah, in terms of MLS, yeah, look, it's obviously not the premier league across the world in terms of soccer, and I think that's what makes it unique in that. Obviously, say with basketball, the Euro League is popular, but not quite like the second most popular soccer league in the world. In the same way with the KHL in Russia, from what I know, is the second best league as far as hockey on the globe. It doesn't really compare to NHL. Like soccer is very fun in that there are so many leagues that are, I guess, comparable to each other, particularly the top 5 in Europe or international stuff or the Champions League. So like there is a very large ecosystem and a very large, I guess, way of maneuvering these, and they're more comparable than like a clear major league minor league kind of setup, and that every league kind of has their own idiosyncrasies, and particularly the one we're talking about, MLS, has a lot of little things that make it unique around the world. But style of plays when it comes to Germany, France, or England can all be different. Club versus international, like all these things I think are what makes soccer what it is. Like, and the fact that you can be an MLS fan and know it's not quite the same quality as the Premier League, but you're getting something different, and it's something that, again, it's something that's unique, and it's something that's worthwhile. It has its own place, and the same way that if you're a German Bundesliga fan versus, again, an Argentine top-tier fan or a Brazilian Serie A, like all these leagues are different, and all of these leagues can coexist with one another and also within the same marketplace as each other. That it's just something that there's something for everybody everywhere, and the fact that you can be a big soccer fan of however many leagues that you can find time to watch it and feel like an extra.
Maggie, you've worked on the business side of things. I mean, MLS, when you're dealing with contract situations, I can imagine with players. Other leagues, there's not necessarily a salary cap. There's not an issue with paying a certain amount of money. I've had to explain to a lot of players in England who'll call me and say, I want to come over. This is how much I want to earn. And I'm saying, well, you're not a DP. And they're like, what does that mean? This is like, I'm playing in the Premier League. So how do you deal with that on the business standpoint, trying to almost manage the expectations of, look, MLS is different. It's not quite a case of, here's how much I want. They're going to pay you.
Yeah, I'm still like, as most people say, fairly new to the agent side. Only been in it for about 2 years now. But, I deal with that every day. having to explain to players that are coming from especially places like England where obviously with the EPL they're so used to seeing major contracts, and I'm like, look, there was even a point in time where MLS was looked at as the retirement league, right? And so players are now looking at it like, well, okay, I want to make this because Arsenal paid me this, and I'm like, you have to be realistic. There is a such thing as a salary cap. Then you kind of got to go through the salary cap. You got to go through DP. You got to explain GAM and TAM and all of those things to them. And they're like, what is this? This is a foreign language. And I also just kind of try my best to explain that it's very different, from the other leagues. If I'm speaking to players that have come from like Bundesliga and understanding even the transfer fee, what you're going to get out of that, it's a lot different than if they were transferring from EPL to, Bundesliga, it's a lot different. So at times it can be stressing because I have to repeat it over and over. Sometimes I'm like, I might as well create like a manual that can kind of help the players and help the leagues, outside of America understand how MLS works. So, yeah,
at some stage within this, I'm going to have Tom break down TAM and GAM and tell us and explain the whole thing properly,
if
so we can walk away knowing.
He can. Yes.
I agree. I've seen it in so many of his tweets. I get a little bit stressed out when I see it. But guys, I've looked at the growth of the league, and I would argue we have had other leagues in the past in America that have done well. They've brought in the big names. Maggie had mentioned, the retirement league, and I've seen a pivot from MLS, and I've argued to a lot of people, particularly back in Europe, I am European, that some of the differences in how MLS has done things is the reason why it's continued to grow. Do you guys feel that way? Tom, again, I'll throw it to you first. I feel like if they had just opened it out, we might be in a similar situation to what we saw back in the day with the NASL and, overspending. But the league has steadily grown because of some of these restrictions and those kind of things put upon the money that each club can spend. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, and particularly when it comes down to, I like to kind of break the league down into eras like MLS 1.0, 2.0, like you've seen, discussions if we're going to 4.0 or whatever now with some of these signings. But particularly at the beginning, like these were completely necessary, and like it's in vogue to kind of make fun of like the rules now, and maybe there are some things that the league has been a little slow to change or a little bit slow to kind of progress on, but the league would have folded in like 2002. Like it almost did around that era. Like these were completely necessary. And for everything that, say, the right criticism and fair criticism that MLS has gotten, one thing that you can't really knock it for is the survival / like business acumen that has come from leadership that, again, has kept this league afloat and has gotten it to a place where we're all like, okay, let's take off the training wheels even more, or let's let some of these billionaires, if they want to overspend, then screw it. Let's let them have as much money as they can spend, or that's why the U22 initiative came in. Then okay, here's, you could spend $10 million on a transfer fee that you don't have to put on the budget if you want to, or you could just re-sign a homegrown player, something like that. Like, again, I think that it's fair criticism that some rules that have remained that should have kind of been done away with or kind of upgraded, but this was completely necessary, and that's a reason why I try to be a little slow and cautious in throwing out criticism of, okay, we got to take everything away, when it's like, all right, if they did that in 2002, if they did that in 2005, if they did that, when Beckham came, maybe the league wouldn't still be here now. And you started this off by using the phrase retirement league or whatever. That was definitely something that was true about this league, even as recently as probably 6 or 7 years ago. Some of the bigger names were guys who just weren't really cracking it in Europe, or the names you knew were clearly on their last legs. But I think particularly over the last couple of years, obviously the drive to youth is phenomenal, and the driving force is the league continuing to grow, and the average talent level continuing to increase. But I still think that there's such a key role that guys like, say, Xherdan Shaqiri, Lorenzo Insigne, you go back to Robbie Keane, insert any big name here that, like, sure, like, might it be slightly like more, would it be more valuable for a club to spend, the fee that Chicago spent on Shaqiri on, a 20-year-old, and then maybe you can sell that player in 3-4 years for, double that and get your money back? I mean, I guess if you're looking at a business standpoint, but if you just wanted to watch a league that has youth and only for youth development, why wouldn't you go watch the Eredivisie or the Brazilian Serie A or the Argentine top flight? Like some of these leagues that are world renowned, like, one of my favorite things about MLS is that you can watch Ricardo Pepi get started. And then you could also watch Lorenzo Insigne spend the last few years of his prime. And you could watch Xherdan Shaqiri and Sebastian Giovinco at the level of these two guys when he came here. You'll get somebody who's earlier in their prime, and like things continue to shift and things continue to change. But I really do hope that there's always a place in this league for the right kind of motivated, older, former global superstar like Nani, like Wayne Rooney, like Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Like, I don't think it's as binary as the drive to youth and like getting rid of the retirement league. Like, I think for diversity's sake, in terms of reasons to watch and reasons to care, I think it's really important to have, young in prime and even, the big name who might be at the end of their prime or kind of sliding into the last few years of their career.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And Maggie, I'll go to you on this because you look at Serie A now. They're quick to bring in Ibrahimovic. Edin Dzeko's at 35, 36, still performing at that high level. But I always felt, Maggie, the initial, fascination with bringing in aging stars was almost trying to appease the Eurocentric fans. We have to compete with them. We have to make them happy. I think the pivot has made, the younger fans even more interested. And you see, players like Thiago Almada, where MLS is beating out other leagues, other teams in other leagues getting players. It just bodes well for the future. And again, is testament to, look, we might do it a little bit differently here, but we can do it in a way that we can be successful moving forward.
Yeah, I agree a lot, and a lot of what Tom touched on in terms of the youth development. I mean, what we've seen in the past, maybe 2-3 years, when you have guys like McKinney, Richards, Reggie Cannon, a lot of these guys that have gone over, even Daryl DK is probably one of the most recent.
Yeah.
I mean, You see some of these guys and you're like, wow, this really is becoming, this is the place for talent. America has it. MLS has it, I know we haven't spoke about other leagues, but there is another league too that I think if you give it a couple of years, it'll definitely be, or it's already shown itself to be a funnel for it. And so I do want to see more of that though. Like I want to see at least every year there's 2 to 3 guys coming out of MLS, whether it's the academy, it's 1 year with the home team as a homegrown player and then being able to kind of cross over to Europe. And to be honest with you, a lot of these younger players, especially players I talk to, that's their dream. That's their goal. Their goal is, hey, I want to get this development here through the academy. I've been with the academy since, young age. I'm able to get a homegrown, contract, or even if I'm not able to get that homegrown, but I'm able to kind of cross over to Europe at a young age. That's what I want to do because that's the dream. But, also too, a lot of players that I've spoken to in European leagues, you'd be surprised in terms of the age. I'm expecting to hear someone that's like 30 saying, okay, I'll come over to MLS. But now I'm starting to get younger guys that are asking the question, like, how does it work if I'm able to leave, Bundesliga and come over to, I don't know, a place like FC Dallas because I really like their style of play, or I have friends that play, that were able to kind of make that crossover and play there. So
I love the summers in Dallas, that kind of thing.
Yes, right. Or how do I get to New York City? But New York City is tough to get there. But anyways, so it's when I get those phone calls and I'm shocked because I'm like, wait, this guy could go play in EPL. He really wants to play here. And even there's a lot of questions about how do I get to Miami? We all want to play for Inter Miami because we all want to play with Beckham. And obviously you all know, Tom, I think you had brought this up earlier about Beckham coming over to MLS and what that was like, and obviously the Beckham rule, and we'll probably touch on that when we get into Ntim and GAM and all that good stuff and DP. So, for me, I just want to see more. I want MLS to produce more talent. Literally be that place that these leagues in Europe are saying, this is where we need to look. And we don't even need to just necessarily look at the first teams. Now we need to start paying attention to the academies because that's where it starts. So I definitely want to see more of that.
Maggie, Tom made a great point earlier. He said you still don't want to lose the fact of bringing in players like a Robbie Keane or a Nani who just has come in and done so well in the league. Is that what you need? First of all, it was a lot of older players. Then, we know the pivot over the last couple of years, young players, and not just young players, but now I think there's almost an unspoken agreement with MLS clubs and the young players saying, look, we are going to give you the platform and we will help you get to the next point if you want to go to Europe. Is that balance, because I know you've worked on the marketing side of things before, is that the best way to sell this league? Is that a more attractive sell for companies who are going to, align themselves with MLS?
That's a great question. I look at it two ways, right? Because that is a way that MLS can go. But while they're also doing that, I would try to say, let me show that MLS is no joke. We're no joke at producing talent. We're no joke at finding talent and developing talent. I'm still waiting for the day where we have our own, as we say, or as I like to say, LeBron James. I'm still waiting for that day. Me, for someone that has come from working with NBA teams and NFL teams and other league teams, I've seen it where they take the time and they really invest. And so I would love to see that with MLS. I would love to see a player that started from the academy, works his way up, doesn't necessarily have to go to Europe to be this sensation. He could actually be in the States, and he's doing that here within the league. And I think if there's an opportunity that for MLS to have that, as well as continuing to say, we're going to take young players from other leagues and vice versa, then that could be a great marketing tool. But it really starts from the side of MLS saying we're going to really invest more, right? Like there's a player that just went over to Europe, and everyone questioned me on it, whether I thought it was a good move. I'm obviously talking about Kevin Paredes, right?
Yeah.
Left from DC United, went through the academy. Great, phenomenal player. Probably one of my favorites. I wish he would have stayed maybe one more year. Everyone's like, no way, he should have gone now. And I'm like, no, I think he should have waited one more year. Everyone said, no way, you wouldn't take it. No, if I was his agent, I would have advised him to stay one more year. One more year.
Well, so
not
going
because he's
to
not
the.
talented.
Oh, go
He
ahead. Sorry,
has it, what'd you say, Tom?
No, I'm sorry. I thought you were done. Continue.
No. So basically, with a player like that, and how he was able to obviously make that transition over to Europe, and we'll see how it goes there. But once again, we're seeing that happening where there's just a lot of talent coming out. Some of them may be going too early, some may be going at the right time. But if I'm MLS, I would really focus a lot on that academy, because there's about 5 guys right now that I see from just the academy side alone that even if they don't get signed as a homegrown, they have potential to go to Europe right now.
Just a couple things there, though. First of all, I don't think that it's realistic to the idea of, as you called it, like a LeBron James of MLS. Like, it's not. I don't even know if that's ever going to happen, because even in some fantasy world in 5 decades or however long that MLS is the best league in the world, you're still going to have guys leaving. Like English players, like maybe not as much as others, but English players leave the Premier League. Like some of the best, they ended up at Real Madrid. Like I don't think that that's ever a realistic scenario in this sport versus NBA or NHL. You don't have teams trying to sign LeBron James from the NBA to the EuroLeague. You don't have teams trying to sign Sidney Crosby from the NHL to the KHL. So I just don't think that that's something that's, I guess, realistic given just the nature of this sport. And that's not anything wrong. Like, look at when Josie Altidore and Michael Bradley came back to MLS, they got a lot of criticism about it, as if that was, the worst thing to do that they could for their careers with the national team. There's always going to be people saying that, and there's always going to be, oh, why didn't you leave to go challenge yourself further? And I guess in like Kevin Paredes' case, first of all, I don't know exactly what his homegrown contract was, but those are usually in the region of 80,000 to 100,000, give or take. He had been for a couple years, so it's not like he hasn't been getting some money. I don't know what he's making at Wolfsburg, but I'm sure that he saw that increase double, triple, quadruple, whatever the figure is, and I'm sure that the bonus is depending on how much you play. And based on sources I've talked about, things that I know, Kevin Paredes, when he showed up, he like any other person who's an elite talent and like an elite at their craft or whatever it is, particularly athletes, he walks into Wolfsburg and he thinks he's the best left back on the team from day one. Like, you have to have that belief in yourself or no one else will. So I like, as much as I agree with the sense that I thought that he was going to be here for one more year, when a team comes in with the $7.5 million bid, a German Bundesliga team, promising to raise your salary, potentially triple, quadruple, whatever the exact number is, definitely increase it very handsomely. I can't ever blame a player for going to do that. I can't ever, because I'm not going to spend into somebody else's money. And two, like, I'm not going to blame somebody for making a career choice. Again, both, like, not saying he did it monetarily. Like, this is what's supposed to be right for your development. This is, moving up a league. Like, it's not controversial to say. And, like, so for all these reasons, like, if they have this offer, like a quick tangent, that when Ricardo Pepi mania was happening all offseason, and Dallas wanted to keep him for another year, and they thought, one, it's good for you, it's good for us. All of this, like, in terms of where you're going to play, you're going to increase your value, you'll get better opportunities, same opportunities, whatever it is. When some of these bids started coming in that were super real and, like, too much for Dallas to realistically, turn down, or at least they have to talk to, Ricardo Pepi's dad came to the club and said, like, listen, like, the Pepi family is a family of opportunity. You can't promise me that this opportunity will be here in 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is. You have to let them go. So again, if I'm trying to put myself in one of these players' shoes, like, I'm never going to criticize them for saying, like, yeah, I'm going to take this because what if it never comes again? Like, everybody thought Kellen Acosta, when he went to Dallas to Colorado, he'll have plenty of chances to go to Europe. It hasn't happened yet, and just because of contract situations and everything else, like, he's getting paid well in MLS, he's performing well in MLS, he's with the national team. But I know that's a goal of his. And just saying, oh, it'll happen one day, maybe it doesn't. Like, maybe the right team doesn't come along. So again, like, I'm never going to criticize somebody. And then again, I don't think that it's realistic to expect, we're going to ever have the best player in the world that stays here for 20 years, because it's, just the nature of soccer. There's so many different teams, so many different leagues that are pulling for you.
I think that's a good point. Maggie, I think I get your point as well, because I feel it too. Sometimes as a club, you hear there's interest and you go, right, we're selling. And for me, if you have a little bit more of a reference point of playing games, of becoming an all-star in the league, of 2 seasons, maybe instead of 7 million, you're going for 20 million. And
right.
I get your point as well, Tom, of the gamble of saying, well, it might go the other way. This player might not live up to that billing. But I think we are going to see that more and more. The more players that go over and are successful, the more this league is going to be looked at as a breeding ground. But one comment I always get annoyed at, guys, is this idea of we don't want to become a selling league. And I find this bizarre, because I think every league is a selling league. Now, I think in England and in La Liga, you have 1 or 2 teams that aren't selling teams. But even in La Liga, most of those teams are selling teams. Same in the Premier League, same in the Bundesliga. They end up at Bayern Munich. So why is this seen, or why was it seen for so long as a negative term? And what caused that shift? Because I even talked to some owners, and they were like, no, they're not going to get our young players. And then all of a sudden it pivoted to, wait, they're going to pay for it? Yeah, okay, our young players can go. What caused that pivot for you?
Was this for Maggie or me? I'll start. I don't know.
Yeah, both of you. Yeah.
I guess first one, like, it's funny that you bring that up. That, like, I talk to sporting directors about this all the time, and they're like, because sometimes, like, there are obviously fans who are like, well, and this is not an unfair thing. We're like, what do I care if the owner gets $10 million? Like, I'd rather see my favorite player stay here or whatever. It's like, I understand that sentiment, and talking about the whole selling league, selling club, or whatever. Like, GMs all the time, like, the first thing they say is what you just said, Keith. He's like, every club in the world, other than, like, Barcelona, Real Madrid, PSG, Bayern Munich, and a couple English clubs, are selling clubs. Every single one in the world. So of course we are. And, like, just the way that things go in the global food chain and up the hierarchy is that's how it's going to be. And it is part of the business to make this, rather than, a team like Chelsea that just spends money because they have a Russian oligarch for an owner with bottomless pit of money, or PSG, Manchester City, all this stuff. Like, this is just part of the game. And it's cool to see that. I think fans have realized that too. And obviously, most importantly, people in, positions of power around the league have realized that, like, oh, like, that's another way that we can get wins. Like, you can get trophies, and then you could also just be something that Dallas are doing. Obviously, you're chasing trophies is what you're always doing, but Dallas have this reputation of selling these guys to Europe. Philadelphia Union, like, they continue to celebrate Brendan Aronson, Mark McKenzie, and anybody else that they produce. Like, that's a sense of pride in the world of global soccer, and it is, again, really nice to see that the shift has really happened in terms of perception and smart people being in positions of power, and people realizing that, oh, like, this is just what it is. This is part of the game, and something to get behind.
Maggie, I would argue that it's made it easier for MLS clubs to sign young players, because I've worked in the youth game in this country, and I talked to young players, and they were like, I'm afraid to go to an MLS team because then they own my rights and all of this, and I have to sign there, and I'll never get to Europe. Now the clubs are working. I mean, you said you're only in the industry for the last couple of years. Before, trust me, it was mayhem. But do you feel that you can work a little bit easier now with MLS teams in terms of creating that pathway for a Kevin Paredes of signing and then moving on to Europe and just creating that avenue moving forward for the player as we look to get some of our best players into European leagues?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time speaking with sporting directors as well, like what Tom mentioned, and it'll be a lot of those conversations like, oh, I don't know if I want to get rid of this player, or let me see if you have this player, and it's always a back and forth thing when it comes to that. So a lot of times, even when they say like they're not selling, I don't really buy it. I'm like, yeah, right, because what if I have this club from Germany that's interested? You're definitely going to at least take the conversation. Now, if you tell me flat out no, then maybe I might believe you. But yeah, it's important to build that pathway, and I like to say, when working with the teams, there's always like so much to consider, right? Because it's like, for me, being an agent, but then also being a marketer, I always kind of have two sides, two hats working for me, where I'm kind of like, okay, look, if you are going to sell this player, you got to think about the whole entire package and what you're getting and what you can do with this player, especially. And especially, you touched on the rights. And a lot of times players in various leagues don't necessarily understand how that works, where they're like, oh, this MLS team still has my rights, or what does this mean? Or, what does that mean if I go to Bundesliga and, MLS still has my rights, or they get a fee for that? Like, what is that? I thought it's just a transfer fee. That's it. It's like, no, there's a lot there that you don't know. And then that's when you got to kind of explain it to them. And sometimes I wish that all leagues kind of operated the same, but then I guess that's what makes soccer or football, depending on what part of the world you're in, that's what makes it unique and special in its own kind.
MLS and unique definitely go together.
Yes, extremely unique, because when I'm here, I'm like, oh, I forgot salary caps. I forgot about this. But when I'm in a whole nother coast of the world, there's no such thing as like a salary cap. It's like, what is that? That doesn't even exist. So, it's something that, like I said, in due time, and I want to see more of that pathway being created, where there are more players that are going across, and even vice versa. I would love to see some young European players coming to America and being able to be a part of MLS too.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories was, I think it might have been when Steven Gerrard was coming to MLS. I believe he was on the discovery list for New York Red Bulls. Like, you discovered Steven Gerrard. It's just how people can't sign contracts yet. No, you're owned. You like they're going to get money for you based on writing you on a list. And how?
I think I read
we
that.
Can get into that.
On Tom's post, Tom had a post about that.
but Tom, one thing
that's where we go for all our sources, for me at least. I have to look at Tom. Whatever Tom says goes.
Yeah, I mean, and the shirt sense as well. The shirt today is absolutely. I was hoping you would come large, and you came large. But you guys mentioned Ricardo Pepi, and there was one thing that I always felt, and again, going to other American sports, players sign contracts. That's it. Now, if you go to Bundesliga, a player will sign 4 different contracts in a season. You've played 8 games in the first team. You've scored 3 goals. Rip it up. We're going again. Rip it up. MLS never was as reactive as that. It was like, well, you're on this 3-year with 4-year options, and you're stuck, and we're going to keep you on that. But last year I saw Pepe sign a new deal in the midst of all of this to make sure he was being rewarded. Cade Cowell this offseason, similar. Yep. Are we seeing MLS pivot in that regard and being more, reactive to players' form, to players' value, and making players feel like they are valued by the club, or am I just misreading that? Tom, I'll let you start, and then Maggie, you can talk from the agent standpoint after.
Yeah, no, you're totally correct, and I think that's been the biggest shift in in terms of being a signing league. Are these clubs, working with the players and with the players' representatives? Like, people I've talked to, again, from club executives to player representation, all that. Like, it's genuine, and when they say that, I guess we'll use the Philadelphia Union as an example. Like, they theoretically could have squeezed more money out of the Brandon Aronson deal. Like, I know it was still a really good deal for the club. It was like $6.5 million up front and incentives to take it to $9 million that I've been reporting that it's all going to hit at the end of this year. But like they probably could have held out for another $1 million or whatever it was to a team in the Bundesliga or the Premier League or something like that. But Ernst Tanner said this on the record. Jim Curtin said this on the record. Like, yeah, like we thought that Salzburg was the best fit for him, both stylistically, both at this point of his career, and you know we want him to succeed. And with all of that, with this open dialogue, like things are really improving. And like you said before, that it's helping, you know, convince more young players to come here because you're not just going to get stuck or you're not going to be like, well, sorry, you signed a contract, like you're screwed. Like, look at what Dallas has done for the last three out of the last 4 players that they've transferred. Like, so I mean, taking Tanner Tessman out of it because he was only in the first team for a year, so there wasn't really time for him to get a new contract. But Reggie Cannon signed a new contract before, you know, months before he was transferred. Brian Reynolds signed a new contract 3 months before he was transferred. Ricardo Pepi signed a new contract within the last year before he was transferred. Like, all these things are both to give the club obviously a little security and negotiating power, but that's because the players trust. Like, Ricardo Pepi signed a 5-year contract. Dallas, like, theoretically could have said, sorry, tough luck. Like, you signed the contract. Don't know what to tell you. Like, we haven't gotten an offer that we wanted. Like, they do that in hand, knowing that, you know, thing that it's going to be, we're going to work together. It's not just going to be whatever the hell you say yes to or no to that we're just going to do. And then you brought up Cade Cowell. That was like slightly different in that his contract expires, I think, after next year or maybe even this year. I forget what the specifics are, but he loves it in San Jose. He believes that they're the best place for his development right now. And they believed in him enough to give him a U22 initiative deal, which is more than homegrowns normally get. And then you look at what Dallas did for Jesus Ferreira. He re-signed a contract and they made him a DP. They said, you know, like, we're going to compensate you for what you could. They could have looked at him and said, hey, like, this has never happened. A homegrown player has never signed a DB contract in the second or whatever deal. Like, so your asks are unreasonable. But instead they were like, no, like, we value you. And if you were a 19-year-old from South America who had your stats in MLS this year, you probably would have gotten a DP deal, and we probably would have had to pay X amount of millions of dollars for you. So that factors into the cost too. Like, so these are things that, again, I'm really encouraged by, and it's easy to just do lip service and say this, and I've heard from teams for years saying stuff like that, but like seeing it actually happen and seeing again with Dallas and Philly, I think are two at the forefront of this. NYCFC did the same thing with James Sands and Edward Atuesta with LAFC. He could have walked for free, but he said, like, all right, like, we'll wait until the right bid comes in. I'll stay 1 more year, kind of thing. So it's just really cool. And it's really cool to see that, like, players, clubs treat, you know, not all players obviously, but you know, they treat them more like partners rather than like, hey, you're just an employee at my business. So these are things that I think are really, really positive for the league and just where the world is going right now.
Maggie, you felt that from the agent standpoint? Because, I mean, for me, looking at Bundesliga, I've dealt with some clubs there before, and they really are so proactive with the contracts. And the minute you're playing well, it's a new deal. You know, have MLS become a little bit more flexible in terms of, you know, renegotiating and making sure players are paid to their value?
Yes, everything that Tom said, I'm in 100% agreement with, and especially, you know, on the player representation side, the clubs have really, I've been impressed, I want to say, within the past like year of how they've handled, you know, players and their contracts and just really showing that investment and that they really do care about the players' well-being. So for me, I mean, like I said, don't want to sound redundant, but everything that Tom touched on, yes, and just from my experience
don't give him
like
all
I
the
said,
credit, Maggie. We don't want to build him up too much here, okay?
Listen, I give him this. Everything that he said verbatim, I'm shaking my head like, yes, agreed, 100%. Yeah, I mean, like I said, for me, it's the same. It's the same on the player side. I don't have a Ricardo Pepi on my roster just yet, but you know, maybe come back to me in like another year or two, and then I'll tell you.
I always feel
how that is, but yeah, but yes, they've been very, you know, just very receptive, very open to just working with player representation. And I'll be honest with you too, I think it also too depends on sometimes the agents too, because if there are agents that are easy to deal with, then it makes it so much better. Because keep in mind, a lot of these players, like whether it's Daryl DK or, you know, Ricardo, like I think Ricardo's agent, if I'm not mistaken, is not even based in America. So sometimes it could be a bit tough, but if you do have that agent that makes it easy to work with, it's going to make the deal and everything else so much easier. and I try to tell other agents that, like, look, if you want to deal with MLS reps, they're actually not as tough as you think. But if you're coming in with this certain notion or this intention to say, I'm going to make sure I get all of this money or whatever, then you're kind of coming in with the wrong intention, because you have to also keep the player's best interest at heart. And if it works, because at the end of the day, too, it is a partnership, especially if that player is going to be going to Europe. It's still a partnership. You still have to respect the club and the staff and everyone that you're dealing with, because they have the players' rights, and you want to make that deal as smooth as possible. There's been a couple of deals we've seen where at one point the club could be a little like, no, we're not ready to sell. But the agent is trying to find ways to get the player out. Or the agent may communicate with a team, let's say in Bundesliga or EPL, and say, oh, no. Yeah, my client's ready to go for this, but you got to remember, if the club has that player's rights and you're not nice, that can go left. So, yeah.
Maggie, all I've heard about agents is good things. They're always so good to deal with. They're such easy people to deal with.
Now,
you guys are.
Keith, you're one of my favorites, but I gotta disagree with you there, because I can tell you, as an agent, there's some agents I'm like, yeah, I don't ever want to speak to them for anything, So, but yeah, it's not a easy job, but at least for me, I can only speak for myself. I do my best to be respectful to every single person involved. And at the end of the day, I work for the player. So my number one goal is to always make sure the player's best interest is there, and it makes sense. Because if it doesn't feel right to me, and if it doesn't feel right to the player, I don't care how much money's on the table. It's just not going to work. So, and it's also too important that agents also know their players too, know what your clients are into, know whether they want to go and play for that club. Yeah. Sometimes you have players where they don't want to go. They've never been to Germany or Belgium or France, and they don't know what that's like. And if you're just sending them because it's a big payday, but it's like, you're not the one that's going to be there playing, they are. And then that's how their first year becomes not so good. There's one big player I can name. I'm not going to, but I know he had a rough transition to where he is. And unfortunately, I would have loved to help that player out of their situation. But I said, look, as long as you're under contract with your current agent, I can't do anything about it, And they couldn't go back to their original MLS club, because it was just one of those deals that it wasn't that great. But, yeah. Well, so you have situations like that, and then you have good ones.
One of my best friends is an agent. He reps Raheem and Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain in the Premier League. And we sat down, I think it was last year, and we're getting to the weird moment for you here, Tom. And he was talking to me about MLS and the structure. And I said, well, you have TAM and you have GAM money. And he was like, what? Like, he's a London guy, one of the most, incredible characters you've ever met in your life. And he was like, what on earth are you, what is this? And I'm like, you have designated players, and then you have TAM money, and you have, so come on, this is your big moment. This is what people are tuning in for. Explain TAM and GAM. Explain who came up with this idea, and what it does for clubs, and how we utilize it for clubs.
That's a good question with the who came up with it, or where I'll be able to trace back to all those origin stories. I know TAM came in 2015. And obviously it's confusing, and particularly at the beginning it was a little arcane and a little bit difficult to manipulate or figure out. But I think the easiest way that I've learned how to explain it is, so let's call the salary cap is like 4.8 million or whatever it is. Allocation money lets you expand your salary cap. So it's discretionary funds to you can use it in multiple different ways. Like, everybody can see the talent acquisition when you trade for a player or whatever, which again is not quite a term that your agent friend in London or any other leagues would be, particularly familiar with. But, its best use is when its most valuable use is buying down contracts. So obviously when it comes to DPs, which everybody looks at, the Lorenzo Insignes, the Gonzalo Higuains, insert any of these big names who are making a lot of money. DP is just anybody who makes more than the max budget charge, which is $612,000 this year. So anywhere between 12 and the max allocation money that you can buy down is $1 million above that. So if you have $1 million in allocation money, you can have a player who's being paid like a DP at 1.6 million. You use $1 million in your allocation money to buy that contract down. So that's like giving yourself an extra $1 million on the salary cap. So the teams that are smartest, that I've, you can use it again. It's best to diversify, use it in both ways. But I guess the easiest and most simple way is it's just a way to expand your salary cap. And there's a reason why that, again, even including DPs because of how they come in on the contract, on the budget charge, everybody's salary cap is technically the same, but teams spend in entirely different ways, whether it's transfer fees, whether it's, just paying a DP $8 million when he hits your cap at 612,000, or it's we have 8 players who make between 600,000 and 1.6 million, and because we were so good with our allocation money, we can buy most of them down and then sign more DPs. So then again, it's just a way to get it's a complicated way to get more value for your money in terms of salary cap, and the best teams find ways to kind of hoard allocation money and know when to trade a player for $2 million to Dallas, or trade a player to DC United for $750K, whatever it is. Or if you're Dallas, like, you can get allocation money from selling players. So they've got all this allocation money sitting there that, all right, we want Paul Arriola. It doesn't matter what it costs. We can get him because we just sold 5 players to Europe and we have an extra $6 million in allocation money or whatever it is.
You got that, Maggie?
Yeah. No, I mean, but that's why I was just all ears. I was like, yeah, Tom is gonna break it down the best way possible. Okay, I'll throw this in really quickly. This is a question for Tom. Which club would you say, at least, well, I mean, the season is starting this week, but would you say was smart in terms of knowing how to still kind of have like a DP spot without having to break the budget?
Yeah, I mean, there was a ton of moves and a ton of things that I liked in the offseason. And again, like, I'm generally optimistic when it comes to these things, and so it's easy to talk yourself into a lot of things on paper. But I know, Keith, with all your ties to Seattle, that with the first one that comes to mind, maybe just because I'm looking at you, but what the Sounders did in terms of finding ways to re-sign their best players and sign contract extensions to a couple of their best players, like, that weren't free agents yet, like Raul Ruiz-Diaz and João Paulo, while adding Albert Rusnak in free agency as a DP, like, it's super worthwhile.
Yeah.
And again, finding ways to keep Alex Roldan, who is due a very big contract extension, given where he vastly outperformed his deal last year when he was learning his new position and became one of the best in the league at it. Re-signing Freddie Montero, Will Bruin. They pretty much brought everybody back except for Shane O'Neill. And I don't think I'm missing anybody off the top of my head. Before they traded Brad Smith because they had a handful of left backs that could do the job. And Garth Lagerwey, after the trade, he was like, yeah, every dollar of the allocation money that we got in this trade is going to the contracts of these players. So I think it was cool to hear that transparency / like, it's better for the club to explain it so people know exactly. But, like, again, that was the best way in going back to how I was saying that the allocation money expands the salary cap, and like that's just a good succinct way to say that, like, yeah, the Seattle shouldn't be able to afford all these players, but the way that Garth Lagerwey and that front office has maneuvered with cap, the cap gymnastics that they've performed, the allocation money that they've set aside for contracts and stuff is again, it's super impressive, and it's why that they're the Supporter Shield favorites, I think, to myself and just about everybody else in the league.
We told you it would get weird. By the way, Albert Rusnak's agent is also my friend that is based in London.
Oh.
But yeah, just on all of this, it's again what separates the way MLS does business to other leagues. And I've always heard, like, again, going back to how we started, this was like, we were trying to embrace the Eurocentrics, the FC. What do you make of? Because I look at other sports, and when I'm back home, you hear the San Francisco 49ers, the Green Bay Packers, all of those things, and the names, and it has that American feel. And over the last couple of years, we've seen, like, the throwbacks where it's like, what's the new LA team going to be called? LAFC. Like, what's the Charlotte team going to be called? Charlotte FC. Like, it's gone back to that. Look, for me, I honestly don't care. For me, it's the product on the field. If you want to call yourself, the Dragons, I'm all for it. As long as this team is fun to watch, or FC, it doesn't matter. Does it matter to you guys? Do you feel like MLS should embrace the fact that we're different? We're not FC. We're not United. We have our own names. We have our own culture of a way of doing things. Or do you like it being more aligned with the European leagues? Or, like me, are you just like, either way, all good?
I do lean generally with the like, again, it's not the most important thing, and I try not to get too out of shape, or like keep things in perspective. Like you said, it doesn't really matter what the team name is if the product is bad. It doesn't matter what the team name is if the product is great. But, particularly in the last few years when the league has really gotten like relevancy in terms of the market with the players that come in and out and everything else, and the way that the league continues to grow, I do wish that some of these teams didn't just follow the same blueprint of FC or United. Like Real Salt Lake. I don't think we think about that very much anymore, but that's pretty corny to call it Real, like to make it Spanish just because Real Madrid and like Real Salt Lake. Like, there's a reason why. Like
that's exactly what I think when I land in Salt Lake.
Like the Portland Timbers and Seattle Sounders are like, they have like the rare, I guess, history in North American soccer, like dating back to the 60s or 70s or whatever. Like, I think that's awesome, and like the fact that I was afraid that Chicago Fire, when they did the rebound, was going to take out the Fire or just do the FC or United or whatever. And at least they compromised with Chicago Fire FC. I'm fine with that because they're still the Fire. Like I like Montreal Impact being Club de Foot Montreal. Like, I don't know why. Like why do we need to sound like everybody else? Like, I don't know. And like you look at some of the retro, vintage kind of gear around the league, it's legendary. Like again, I think that the league did a good job. Like last year they leaned into it a little bit where they kind of repurposed and resold some vintage gear, and I think that it sold out very quickly. So it shows that like that there is a market for this, and again that like, I mean, maybe this is just an echo chamber, but there is like a lot of people that I guess feel this way. But like you said, Keith, like in general, like if Lionel Messi is playing for a team that's FC, United, or Timbers, Sounders, Dragons, whatever you want to call it, like people watch. Like it doesn't matter.
Maggie, just because you've worked on the marketing standpoint, I could argue that if you want to be more relevant in the world stage, rather than following the blueprint of the English clubs and European clubs, the fact that you differentiate yourself with a name like Seattle Sounders, Portland Timbers, even Vancouver Whitecaps, that gives you a little bit of an edge in terms of how you're marketing. Am I wrong on that, or do you feel that way as well?
No, you're right. It does give an edge. I mean, listen, whenever I hear new teams being announced, I'm like, oh, here it goes. It's either going to be FC, United this, Real this, so I'm just like, okay. But, kind of like what you both said, I mean, as a marketer, I do care about the name, but I really care about the product, right? It's really about the product, because sometimes if it's a new club and you give them the name Ntim Miami, FC, obviously I cared more about the product and what that first season was going to look like. We're not going to get into it because I love Beckham and I love, the Ntim Miami style. But I question that. I'm looking at Charlotte FC. Charlotte is like another home to me. It's the second home outside of New York City. So the name, when they first got the name, I was like, okay, Charlotte FC, let's see. And now we're going to see what's happening on the pitch. And that's really what I care about, because I think if they're able to, let the product speak for itself, that can kind of help the name. So it's almost like a reverse, right? Where you might hear the name first, but man, the name sucks, but the team is great. Chicago Fire, Tom, you brought up another example when they did the rebrand. I was like, well, Chicago Fire is actually not bad, because you don't have to always say Chicago Fire FC or like Seattle Sounders, Portland Timbers. A lot of times I even forget. I'm like, oh, it's just the Timbers, it's the Timbers. So certain clubs have done very good at picking names, and like Real Salt Lake. Honestly, they're such a good team. I hate to say this, but I tend to like forget about them as a whole, just because I'm like, wait, Real Salt Lake? Like, you might just call yourself Salt Lake FC or something.
I like that name. I do like it because like RSL, I feel like it's like a little bit different. It's just, I do kind of like it.
And RSL is better. RSL is better, but once I hear like Real Salt Lake, I'm like,
well, come on,
and then the
both
branding.
I want you to give me.
I want you both to give
me. I want you both to give me your best. I know you've had ideas in the past in your head. Give me your best idea for an MLS team name. You can pick any team. You can pick a new city. What would it be?
Well, I'll go just because this reminds me of when the old, before they moved to Brooklyn, because I'm a Jersey guy, when the New Jersey Nets were being named, they almost got rebranded as like the Swamp Monsters or something, and like people were like, oh, thank God that got nixed. Like, I think that would have been hilarious. Like, again, I'm not a marketing guy, so I can see where there might be pitfalls there, but like the fact that the Metro Stars used to be a handful, that it was New York, New Jersey, but like I just love seeing New Jersey, the title, things like this. Again, this is completely biased. This is completely me thinking about myself, not as a marketer. So I don't think that this would be that anybody should let me run any of these decisions. But those are the first things that came to mind.
Maggie, I'm just
Man,
trying
I
to picture
don't.
you as an agent explaining to a player. We have a couple of teams interested in you. We have Schalke, we have Nice in France, and we have the Swamp Monsters in MLS. I don't know if it kind of fits. You must have
Yeah,
you
they're
must have a
gonna.
better idea than Swamp Monsters.
I mean, yeah, but if it was Swamp Monsters, and when they asked me, I'd have to give them the history behind it. Like it's New Jersey. Anybody that knows when you're crossing that bridge from New York to New Jersey, whether it's Verrazano Gothels or you're going by the Holland Tunnel, you'll understand why it's called that. But man, if I had to think of a name, it's tough. I'd have to really, yeah. That one is. It's not as
In,
quick.
Inter
Not
Miami
as
was the
quick.
most disappointing for me. I thought Miami
Yeah.
had so much you could do there. Like
Yeah.
Miami, this is bad, but Miami Vice, I think, would have been like, I don't know why. I just and Tom, with that shirt on, I know you're probably more of a Magnum fan, but Miami Vice works as well, right?
Yeah. No. No. No, yeah. Yeah.
um,
It was very. I mean, look, even I like the branding that this team is doing. What is it, St. Louis? I like the branding, what
yeah.
they're doing to lead up to their thing. But even their name, I kind of was like, it's
They
very
put
simple,
the
I
city
guess.
in all
Like,
capitals, which I'm not a fan of. I don't. That just seems overly
right. It's kind of
self-serious.
like let's just take the easy road out. But I don't know. I'd be curious, like I don't know, like Vegas Lights or something. Well, actually, no, there's a Las Vegas Lights.
They exist.
Never mind.
Maggie,
Never mind.
don't start coming.
Never
This is
mind. Never mind.
copyright
We were
laws we
talking
have here, you
MLS.
know.
We were talking MLS. I was thinking, but I'm like, yeah, no, never mind. I totally forgot.
Oh, I
There
wonder
is
why that sounds so
actually,
good.
yeah, like there actually is
Um,
a Las Vegas Lights FC. So yeah, that's not
just,
gonna
just just
come
one other
back to me
thing.
in like.
One other thing I haven't I haven't touched upon, and we'll get into the future of MLS to end. But one other thing that in other American sports we embrace is the draft. You know, the college game. You know, the build up to the draft. It's such a big day, and I've always felt that MLS really wanted that to be the case initially with MLS as well. I've seen kind of a shying away from that, almost an acknowledgement. Look, we can still get players from college, but the reality is, if we want to compete, the younger players are already signed to the MLS homegrown deals. Is there a way we can still make the draft relevant? Does it really matter if it's not relevant, or do you see that kind of going away over the next couple of years in terms of other ways of or other avenues of college players moving into USL deals and then on to MLS?
I think that's a good question there. As like, so the pipeline from college to MLS or college to professional soccer in America is never going to end. I guess that's a half decent point where maybe there isn't a draft and maybe it's some ways to not necessarily bid on players, but find different ways for rights. Like, but I assume that the draft's not going to go away, and there are, you know, I don't think that teams should shut out any avenue of talent acquisition. Like you've seen in
Agreed,
even
yeah.
the last couple of years when academies are fully fledged and have been so for a decade or more. Like there are still players that aren't going to come through the academy system. There's so many players. There's such a big country. Like, again, and I understand why Philadelphia has adopted a strategy of trading away their draft picks. Like, I understand that in the sense that the way that they explain it is we put so much money into our academy. We don't want to use roster spots on players that drafting when we want to reward our academy talent. And I get that. But there are
Sure.
other teams like Dallas with a really good academy and as well that still use a draft. And they still use it to try to find players that, okay, like maybe it's a late blooming player, or maybe that this player is different from what we have right now. So again, I get it, but like I don't think that there's really ever going to be a way away from the draft. Like maybe it won't be like a big production. You know, the pandemic kind of helped accelerate that. Like this year, it was kind of a virtual show, and it was again just some of the MLS on-air talent doing it. We had a couple reporters that went to markets, but maybe it'll just be less of like pomp and circumstance. Like maybe there's something in the future that I've heard as an idea just from nothing like from league people, but just from fans or whatever, that maybe there'll be like a signing day, like in college sports for homegrown talent. But you can't really make teams be like January 1st, you have to have all your decisions on homegrown players or whatever it is. So there is no,
Why not? It's weird.
scenario.
We're embracing the weird.
Yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, I think that there's definitely there's always going to be a value in the draft. Whether it's not going to be, you're not going to get LeBron James, Karl Anthony Towns, or insert how NBA that's how you replenish talent. In MLS and soccer is not going to be like that.
Maggie, I'm guessing percentage wise in terms of time. a lot more of your time is going to be invested in the academy structure in terms of players coming through. But is there still a relevance for you and on your side of things, looking at the college game, looking for that next Daryl DK, of course, who did play in college and within a couple of years was, a 10 million plus player moving to Europe as well. Do you still see a relevance in looking those avenues?
Absolutely. I think anybody that knows me since I became an agent, I live for the draft. Maybe because, being an American, watching sports, like I said, working in other sports like NBA, NFL, so understanding their draft process and what that looks like. For me, I spend probably maybe 60% of my time now just recruiting from the college side. I watch both with college and MLS about the same. Probably a little bit more for the college side, because that's when I came in as an agent. That's actually how I really got through the door with MLS, was me just kind of talking to each sporting director, scouts about talent that they kind of overlooked, that they were not paying attention to. But these were some guys that ended up, getting drafted to teams like Toronto FC and Red Bulls and a couple of other clubs. And so now it was almost like coming into my second draft, these guys were kind of expecting it like clockwork for me to kind of build this list out. This is the person you kind of slept on before. This is the person you slept on, or this is someone else you should consider because this one's probably coming out 2023. So I like Tom said, I don't think the draft is going anywhere. My wish is that and it could be hard, but I think it's doable, that just as much time that's spent and invested into the academy could also be spent on the college side as well. Because like you mentioned, Daryl DK, Tajon Buchanan, like if those guys did not get drafted, who's to say whether they would have, been picked up, right? And I tune into a lot of what fans say as well, and yeah, they could get rid of it, or they could decide to have scouts spend a little bit more time on the college side, go to the games. I think they could invest a little bit more into the combine. I've attended the Players Combine twice now, and I'll say the first one that I went to was a lot better than the last one I just went to. And so I think that investment into the college level could also be major. It could be major as well. So I don't think the draft is going anywhere. I just would like for MLS to put more, just a little bit more investment into that as well, because there's a lot of talent in college that, because remember, like Tom touched on too, not every player from the academy side is going to get that homegrown. So then what happens to those kids that have played in the academy all those years? They don't get the homegrown, and now, their parents are saying, look, at this point, you need to go to college. You need to enroll in college. Okay, so we're not saying this is NBA or NFL, but maybe there is a way for some of these kids to go through the academy, go to college, maybe 1 or 2 years, and then be able to get drafted at some point. Yeah.
Well, we have seen that with kids will go to college and then sign their homegrown deals. So like that, they don't fall off the radar.
Yep,
like
exactly. Yeah, we've seen that just even this past draft. What's the kid? There was about two guys that had that opportunity.
James' brother was one.
Yep.
Like there are a bunch of kids that get signed homegrown deals in college like every year. Like clubs don't give up or stop looking at these kids. So like there's still that.
And even when you take a look at the SuperDraft eligibility list, there are some names that you've probably never heard of. Like you've never heard of these guys, right? So even that gives them a little bit of exposure now too, because it's something that for me, at least every year, I look forward to it. I'm already in recruiting mode for 2023 now, so it's something that I don't think is going to go away, like Tom said. I just want them to invest a little bit more.
Yeah, and I will say I've worked in the college game. I think it's a great avenue for players who haven't quite made it, because if they don't make it, they walk away with a college education as well, and they're set for the challenges in the world too. Guys, look, we are out of time. I have to say I enjoyed it. I think we covered everything. I have slightly more of an understanding of Tam and Gam. So if you can get anything, we at least got that. But Maggie, Tom, I really appreciate your time today. I thought you guys were both excellent in terms of talking about this league, and I look forward to seeing it continue to grow, and look forward to seeing you guys out there as well.
Well, we have seen that. It's going to go to college, and then sign their homegrown deals. So like that, there's still that.
And I will say I've worked in the college game. I think it's a great avenue for players who haven't quite made it, because if they don't make it, they walk away with a college education as well, and they're set for the challenges in the world too. Guys, look, we are out of time. I have to say I enjoyed it. I think we covered everything. I have slightly more of an understanding of Tam and Gam. So if you can get anything, we at least got that. But Maggie, thank you so much for your time today. I thought you guys were both excellent in terms of talking about this league, and I look forward to seeing it continue to grow, and look forward to seeing you guys out there as well.
Cheers, Keith.
Absolutely.
Great job.
Thank you
Good
so
to speak with you.
much.
Thanks, Maggie.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, thanks, Tom. Thank you, Keith. Thank you. Thank you.